Hello, Spookaroos. It is time for another remix episode, and this is a good one. If I remember correctly, this is one of Tom Cole's favorite episodes that we ever did. And he said he wasn't all that excited about the topic when we first, started talking about, this is going to be the subject of the show. But once we got into it, he said this is one of those fascinating stories that kind of creeps up on you. It's the story of the Fox sisters, the little girls from New York who ended up kind of creating spiritualism, which was an actual religion and philosophy that was going around, and I guess technically probably still exists today, but not like it was back in the day. And the thing is, it's all built on a lie. Or was it? Yeah, it probably was. But it's still a good story. So make sure you stay tuned and check that out. But before we go to it, of course, I want to remind you, check out the show's website, spookyas.com. You can find all kinds of things there. You can get the t-shirts. We haven't talked about the Spookaroo t-shirts, but there are Spookaroo t-shirts. And if you want one, that's where you get them. spookyas.com. Spooky, letter A, letter S.com. And you can also find links to our social media, the most important one being Instagram. That's the one I use the most probably. Let me try this again. We are at Spooky Times with Eric D on Instagram. You can also find us on Facebook and find our secret closed group if you just do a Facebook search for Spooky Times with Eric D. I'm sure all of that stuff will pop up, or Spookaroos. Just remember, we're not the clothing company, the children's clothing company, which I think is defunct anyway, but we are the paranormal chat group. So that's fun. You can join us there. And don't forget, of course, if you're a generous soul, you can always join the show's Patreon. The Patreon helps not only the podcast, but also the Witchfinder. The Witchfinder with his street hustle and also his YouTube videos and other goodies coming your way. Anything that we do, because, of course, Spooky AS... No, it's not called Spooky AS anymore. What's the name of the show? Spooky Times with Eric D. Is a Witchfinder production. So, I almost forgot. Speaking of the Witchfinder, as you listen to this episode, you'll notice there's a fun little historical moment where I talk about becoming the Witchfinder for the very first time and what it entailed and how it led, actually, in a roundabout way, to the subject of tonight's show. So, for all those of you who don't know what I'm talking about when I talk about the Witchfinder, well, here is your first ever clue. Some of the things that I say here end up being exactly right, how the future would play out, and some of them are maybe a little bit different. It's definitely more than just a couple shows in an hour, and it's more than just Saturdays. But pound for pound, The Witchfinder is the most successful thing I've ever done, even more successful than this very podcast. So we've got to love The Witchfinder, and I hope that you will. So here's your first chance to hear about him all the way back in 2016. Go ahead, listen to the show, and if you like it, join the Patreon, and we'll see you over there. Welcome to Spooky Ass Shit. I am your host, Eric Donnells, and for the first time in a long time, I'm not sitting here alone. Please welcome to the show, once again, Tom Cole.
Hello, everybody. I am so glad to be here again. Eric, how are you today?
I am good. And you know why? Because I got these.
For those of you who can't see, he has a pair of glasses and a nice red nose with it.
Yeah, like a clown nose. And cooler than the glasses is who I got them from.
Who'd you get them from?
The real life Patch Adams.
Get out.
That's right. Right before taping this episode, I went to a lecture given by the real life Patch Adams. He actually came to my workplace, but unfortunately I wasn't there because I was off teaching a training. But I did get to go to his lecture afterwards.
Oh, that's so cool.
He talked about meeting my clients. So
yeah. I imagine he's a nice guy.
He is a nice guy.
Yeah, of course he's Patch Adams.
Yeah.
His whole life is dedicated to being a great guy.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So what was he preaching today? What was his main philosophy?
It was just about caring and kind of like how to reach people, and basically it was just be nice.
Oh,
Be a nice
that's
person.
That's a really good message.
Yeah.
For all you listeners out there, carry that into your own lives.
And the other thing he said a lot and expressed a lot was like that he wanted to practice medicine, but not the way that, the establishment would have you practice it, which is, what the movie was about and everything. He wanted to do it his way or no way, so he just found ways to do it his own way, which means he doesn't have doctor money, except now that he's famous because of the movie and stuff. He can charge a lot of money for.
But he didn't go out
services.
seeking any money. He just
and he doesn't keep that money that he gets.
Exactly.
He throws it into his hospital, which
yeah.
he's still building 40-something years after he started it.
Right.
So
yeah, I guess that's a message that can go to anyone, and you know, like us in comedy is just keep doing it, and you do it your own way. You find your way, and if you love it enough, things will happen.
Yeah, it was very.
That's an optimistic message, but it's a nice one to live by.
It's a hard one to follow, though.
Oh my God!
Like, drop everything, forget the way that most people do it, and go your own way.
Yeah, like
the world is not set. The world will be against you for doing that.
Oh, absolutely. And it's sweatpants are always going to be there too. Sweatpantsing like pizza. So it's so much easier just to sit and do that than, chase your dreams.
Yeah.
And then you can self-hate after.
Yeah. Well, you can email us about this topic, but I think we should move on to.
Yeah, I think most people have more healthy mindsets and don't think about that.
I don't know. I think you'd be surprised.
Oh, okay. All right. Write in, folks.
I think a lot of us have felt that way. If not at the moment, then we have in the past.
Yeah. Well, that's very cool. Patch Adams, look at you.
Yeah. And another reason I'm in a very good mood today, I have a big announcement. Just last night, I was in Salem, Massachusetts.
Spooky.
That's right. The Salem of witch trials fame from 1692.
Yeah.
We did a whole episode about it. You can go back and listen to it.
It's a great one. It's a really good one.
Solid. But I was there because I had a hearing with the licensing board. And I am happy to report that
You're a witch?
No,
You're
I'm
a certified
not a
witch?
I'm not a certified witch. I am officially licensed as the Witch Finder General of Salem, Massachusetts.
Oh, you're the anti-witch.
I am the witch hunter.
Now, Eric, what does the Witch Finder General, what does that entail?
I will go around town, gathering crowds, and explaining the methods that were used starting in basically medieval times, up through about the 1700s.
Yeah.
To find a witch and what causes people would have to believe someone was a witch.
Right.
And the proofs that they would use to determine if they were a witch.
Awesome.
So it's not just strictly stuff that would have been used in Salem. It's, it goes back a little bit further in history because the stuff they used to do in England was actually way worse. And interesting. So this will be basically, I guess you could call it a living history demonstration.
Oh, that's really cool. So do you get to blindly accuse people and then burn them at the stake? Because that's historically accurate.
They didn't burn people in Salem.
Ah, I don't have my.
They were hanged.
All right. Do you get to hang people?
Well, I at least get to suggest it.
Can you take it a little bit too far?
Well, they certainly did in 1692. So maybe, but no, it's it's going to be my hope is that I'll gather a crowd and then I will commend the crowd for attending and being spiritually vigilant.
Yeah.
Because I'll be playing the part of a hardcore
right. So you'll be spreading
Puritan
knowledge.
minister, But then I'll also say, we need to be careful because the devil does sometimes wear, sheep's clothing.
Right.
So maybe there is a witch among us tonight. And if anyone here has reason to believe that anyone in their party is a witch, speak now.
Yeah.
And then hopefully a little kid will be like, my mom, my mom, my mom. And then we'll drag the poor mom
Excellent.
onto the soapbox and use her comedically.
Yeah, of course.
To be like, oh, well, here's your witch's mark, and here's, let's do this test, and and see if they pass or fail. But of course, the way it's set up, they're going to fail
Every time, yeah.
one way or another. So
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Congratulations. That's
Yeah,
really cool.
Thanks. I do believe I am the first officially town-recognized witch finder that they've had, definitely at least since the 1600s, I believe.
Wow. Look
So,
at you.
And even back then, I don't know if they had necessarily one person that was... The title of Witchfinder General actually doesn't come from Salem. That comes from England, with a gentleman who invented that title for himself to go out hunting witches and would charge towns lots of money to rid them of witches. And he just went around killing people, basically.
Yeah, it's basically... he gave himself a license to kill.
Yeah.
Good for him. He found a way to do it. He found a loophole.
He did. All right. But anyway, so I'll probably be out there, just kind of roaming the streets and setting up my little show, maybe twice an hour or something. Mostly on Saturdays, I imagine. But maybe the odd Sunday, and every once in a while, maybe even weekday nights in the town of Salem.
Yeah, so everyone head on up to Salem. I mean, it's a really cool place this time of year, especially around Halloween. And look for Eric. Look for the witch hunter.
Find the witch finder.
Yeah.
Just be careful.
Yeah, you don't want to be.
Yourselves.
You don't want to be the one found as being a witch.
That's right. You don't want to take the dunking test.
That's coincidence. Northern Texas. An unidentified flying object is reported by at least a dozen people. Although there were no storms in the area, it's dismissed as lightning. Now, Time Life Books announces an important new library, Mysteries of the Unknown, a series that explores the most controversial phenomena of our time and tells you everything that can be known. The Midwest. A mother feels a sharp pain in her right hand. Far away at that exact same moment, her daughter screams as she touches a hot pan. Just chance? Or is it telling us something about our own untapped capabilities? Mysteries of the Unknown goes deeper into unexplained phenomena than ever before. It documents the facts and uncovers what people were never willing to talk about. Stonehenge. A visitor fashions a wire antenna in the shape of an ancient Egyptian symbol. He points it at the stones, and a surge of power rushes into his arm, knocking him unconscious. Was it all in his mind, or was it much more than that? To experience Mysteries of the Unknown, examine your first volume, Mystic Places, for 10 days free. Then decide if you want to dismiss it.
To order your first book, Mystic Places, call 1-800-532-1100. Examine it for 10 days. Keep it a page just $12.99.
So I just played on the podcast. I won't play all 3 commercials.
Right. You're going to post the links for these?
Yeah, I'll post the links.
Okay.
So probably the most famous of the commercials that we just watched is the one where the guy's saying, "Read the book."
Read the book.
Like, what happened to,
I don't know. Read the book.
All these mysteries, And his friend who's recommending the book to him is saying, read the book. But my favorite one is the first one that I showed you, and that's the one that I clearly remember as a child.
Oh, that one was the best. It had a $10 budget, but it was great.
Yeah. The woman who, feels a pain in her hand, and then turns out her daughter burnt her hand 10,000 miles away at the same time.
She complained, but it was dismissed as imagination.
Yeah. Those commercials were really intense, and as a kid, like I said, I believed in everything.
Of course, it's...
So I was like, how could they dismiss it? That's positive proof.
Yeah.
I got to get these books. I got to know all the facts that they don't want me to know.
And I could see that. I could see how your interest would be totally piqued by seeing that.
Yeah. You know what other commercial was like that? Do you remember the Dianetics commercial with the volcano?
No, I don't.
It's a sci-tie Scientology commercial.
Yeah.
I didn't know that as a kid. I had no idea about sci-tie. Now, the Dianetics commercial, you had that intense piano. It's not as intense as some of the other things, but then, it's like, can you improve your intelligence? Page 132. Can you, I forget what some of the other ones were, but, it was all stuff like that. Like, can you do this? Page 1, blah, blah. And then it's like, it's a new breakthrough in looking at the world and everything. And as a kid, you just take everything at face value, right? So you're like, I need to know about new breakthroughs in the world.
Absolutely. Mom, can we get the Dianetics book? Can I have their Christmas?
And it's funny because back then, I'm not even sure my mom would have known what Dianetics was. Like, she wouldn't, living here in Boston.
Yeah, it wasn't big up here, I don't think. It was no
big deal until
right.
maybe 10 years ago or a little bit more. But not back in those days, so
Well, he had only sold 8 million copies at that point, so it wasn't sweeping the nation.
no. But anyway, when I went to this bookstore in Salem, they had a lot of the books from the Mysteries of the Unknown
Excellent.
series. And I said, and they were charging like $10 each,
All right.
which is a little overpriced. But
Yeah,
they were
for an 80s Time Life book, yes.
yes, but they were on hand. So like you can order them for like maybe $60. You can get the whole set
Sure.
off the internet.
Yeah.
But a bird in the hand and all that. So
of
I
course.
said,
And you're in Salem too.
I'm
so
in
it's,
Salem. I'm here. I showed up to do something that took 5 seconds. I might as well get something out of it.
Right.
So I sprang the $10 and I picked up Spirit Summonings.
Ooh, fancy.
Yeah. I knew there was one called Phantom Encounters, I think. And I was like, do I want Phantom Encounters or Spirit Summoning?
That's a tough choice. How did you make the choice?
Well, I figured Phantom Encounters was ghost stories, and I've got
Yeah.
plenty of books of ghost stories. Spirit Summonings,
Yeah, let's just shake it up a bit.
I don't know so much. I don't think I have as many books about people actually summoning spirits.
Right.
So let's go with that
Let's go
direction.
spirit summoning.
So as I started to read this book, I found a story that I found particularly interesting.
Okay.
Because this book is basically about the spiritualist. Let me try that again. This book is basically about the spiritualist movement. Now, here's a problem. I am going to have to concentrate very hard every time I say spiritualist.
Oh, Troziers? We have a Trozier situation?
Yes.
How do you say crayon?
So there's nothing wrong with the way I say crayon. It's you people.
Oh, okay. Like a normal person?
Crayon. That
Crayon.
sounds weird.
Crane? So
No, I'll say it
spiritualism.
like Shut up.
Tell me about spiritualism.
Shut up. You're a jerk.
I know. I am. It's true.
So spiritualism was basically people who, it didn't really depend on a religion. In fact, most of the time religion wasn't really involved. It was just people who claimed that they could talk to the dead,
Okay.
to the spirits of the dead.
Right.
And it really, this had existed before, but it became a movement in the 1800s, where it essentially became kind of like its own religion, where people didn't necessarily have a belief in God, but they believed in the afterlife.
Right. They believed in something. Yeah.
Right. And they were talking about spirits and stuff, so they, that became spiritualism. And there were certain people who would go around saying, I can talk to the dead, I will be the medium.
Right.
Yeah.
So they talk to people on the other side looking for guidance of how to get to like their final resting place. I read something
Sometimes, but
that there was one person, he said that there's 3 heavens and then there's 3 hells and then there's a world in between. It's kind of like a purgatory thing that everyone goes to, and they kind of make their own hell or they make their own heaven.
well, see, that was probably one specific spiritualist.
That
who
was
said
one specific guy,
Yeah.
and he got a lot of heat behind him.
Well, they do, but what's interesting about it is that although we don't call it spiritualism anymore, there are still plenty of people who say that they are talking to the spirits of the
Okay.
dead.
Right.
And there are still people who claim that they go into a trance and become possessed by a spirit from the past.
Okay.
And actually, this book has some lovely contemporary, at the time, 80s pictures of 80s trance mediums.
That's classic trance.
I am going to
or
post
seizure,
these
but either or.
because they are, and just perfectly 80s,
Yeah.
perfectly tranced.
Yeah. The hair is very great.
Yeah. That's a great sweater. Oh, this dude. I believe this guy's still around.
Ooh, look at him.
Yeah. So, this is a wonderful visual for the audio podcast. that
Oh,
we're
of
doing.
course.
But that's why you got to go to spookyassshit.com and check out pictures when I
so you
post
can
them.
get the full story.
Right? Yeah. The full story on spookyassshit.com. I was trying to be like those commercials.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can get the rest of the story.
Yeah. Want to see pictures of 1980s trance mediums? spookyassshit.com.
Folks, you guys know what you want, and we know what you want. Eric has his fingers on the pulse of the audience.
The truth that they won't tell you. That they've kept hidden all these years. All right, we're almost halfway through the episode, and we haven't really gotten to the meat of it. But
cut stuff.
Yeah. But spiritualism... Oh, one thing that's kind of funny is that a lot of the olden time spiritualists were coming up with essentially a mixture of Eastern philosophy and sort of like a humanist approach. A very like... I don't mean self-centered in like a selfish way, but self-centered like as in you need to be your own healing and you you have the power in you.
Yeah, take ownership in yourself.
Yeah, it's a very like self-help.
Yeah. No one's going to do it for you.
phraseology.
You have to do it yourself.
Yeah. But the thing is that essentially when you hear about trance mediums, that's essentially still the message that they tend to give.
Right.
It's like, you don't need to worry about if there's a God or not. It's you that, if there's a God, it's in you. It's, and that's a very common thing, apparently. So maybe that means it's true because for hundreds of years now, the spirits have been saying the same thing.
Could be, yeah. Yeah, the spirits are onto something.
But the spiritualism movement really started with a family known as the Fox family, right here in America.
That's right. That's how we roll.
The Fox family, I guess you could say, begins with Ma and Pa Fox.
That's right. And then they had 3 sassy bitches.
Well, they actually had more than that.
Well, I only read about 3 sassy bitches.
We only concern ourselves with 3. Okay, because they had 4 children when they were young, and one of them was Leah, who will enter into our story again later on. But we're going to take a little break from her. But no, they had a daughter named Leah Fox.
Yes.
But then, Pa Fox's alcoholism created some issues in the family. And apparently, Ma and Pa were not really hitting it off for quite a period of time.
Right.
So their marriage was kind of iffy, but divorce wasn't such a big thing back then, even in cases where the husband was like a fall-down drunk and all that kind of stuff. But eventually, he got himself back together. So good for him.
Yeah, good
for
on
you,
him.
Mr.
That's
Fox.
a success story.
He gave up drinking, and he reconciled with his wife.
Good.
To the point where well into their middle age, it says, I don't know exactly how old they were, but well into their middle age, they had 2 more daughters.
Good. All right.
Now, their other kids had grown up.
Right, Leah and the one who's not named.
Yeah, because Leah was born in 1814.
Yeah.
But the youngest Fox sister,
Born in like 34, I think.
Katie, was born in 37. So
37, all right.
Yeah, Maggie was born in 33, and then
okay.
Kate was born in 1837. So those 2, Maggie and Kate, basically grew up without their siblings in the house. It was just them and Mom and Dad.
Right.
But they lived, keeping in mind that this is the 1800s, in New York, but not New York City. This is a place called Hydesville, New York.
Right.
Which is upstate somewhere and kind of like out in the boonies. And they live in a not-so-great house because, of course, their father had been an alcoholic. And, even though he's turned his life around now,
yes,
still, they don't have a family fortune.
The damage was done.
Right. So now the 2 young girls, Kate and Maggie, are home up in their room one night.
It's hanging out like sisters will do.
On a March evening in 1848.
All right.
The whole Fox family is awoken by mysterious rappings.
Like a bang, right?
Right, but rappings on the walls or on the ceiling. And they don't know where this is coming from. The whole house gets up, and they're looking around, and they can hear these rappings.
What's going on here?
And they think, is there an intruder? Is there animals? What's going on?
Right.
But the rapping stops, so they all go back to bed. But then the next night, same thing. And these mysterious rappings, where they can't find an answer to what is happening, go on for a week.
And they just keep them up all week.
Yeah. Now, on the night of March 31st, the daughter Kate challenged that. Well, they started to think maybe this was a spirit.
Yeah, that it's not just some random bangings that they hear. There's something more to it.
Right. So the youngest daughter, Kate, said, I know how we can test what's going on here. If we ask it to do something and it can do it, we'll know that it has an intelligence, and maybe this is a spirit that we're talking to. So she snapped her fingers in some pattern and said, hey, if you're a spirit, do the same pattern that I do.
Right.
And apparently it did.
Mm-hmm. Crazy.
So then they asked the spirit to rap out the number of the girls' ages.
And lo and behold.
And the spirit correctly identified the ages of the girls by rapping that number of times.
11 and 14 at the time.
Correct. So now, Ma Fox is freaking out.
Oh, yeah. She got the neighbor involved.
She went out and told the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And so now everybody's coming over. This was... have you seen Stranger Things?
I have seen Stranger Things, yes.
This sort of happens on Stranger Things.
Right, you're right, actually. This is kind of funny. Yeah.
So if you haven't seen Stranger Things, shame on you. It's actually a really good show. You should check it out.
Yeah. And actually, I saw The Conjuring 2 last week, and that happens in that movie, too.
I haven't seen that one. But,
it was okay. But something happens in their house, and then everyone in the neighborhood knows.
Yeah.
And then the newspapers get hold of it, much like this.
And then the girls, as the neighbors are there and everything, they work out a system where, like one rap means yes, two raps mean no.
Right.
So now the spirit can answer questions.
Right.
Right. And the girls start calling the spirit Mr. Splitfoot.
Right. Which is another name for the devil.
Right. So that's an odd choice for them.
Absolutely.
But again, it shows, speaking of Salem and those times, how quickly things change. Because if you started saying that you were talking to spirits and the spirit's name was Mr. Splitfoot, you would be a witch.
Of course, yeah.
And you would be in huge trouble.
Of course.
But in this day and age, and
yeah, this is 200 years after that. So.
But still, like it seems like a big jump. Like now it's like a thing that the whole neighborhood's going to come check out.
Yeah.
And the girls aren't thought of as they're talking to demons.
Right.
Maybe there was some of that, but it doesn't, not in anything that I read.
Yeah, I mean, I've read a lot of things that the newspaper these girls are full of shit.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people didn't believe them, but that's another thing. All right, so through the wrappings and whatnot, the spirit eventually gave itself its own name, Charles B. Rosna. And it claimed that it had been murdered 5 years earlier and buried in the cellar. This was, under the previous owner of the house.
Yep.
No missing wandering salesman named Charles B. Rosna was ever reported missing or identified as a missing person. About a month after the wrappings started, a man known as E. Lewis came to visit the house. He was curious about all the tales about the spirits talking and everything, so he went to interview the family members and the neighbors, and he wrote a little pamphlet called A Report of the Mysterious Noises Heard at the House of Mr. John D. Fox. So that little book, actually, that little pamphlet, turned into the first spiritualist writing, even though that was not necessarily his intention. Now, that little pamphlet made its way to older sister Leah. And that's how she first became aware of the things that were happening in Hydesville. Because, of course, this was before telephone.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So that's how she first became aware. Now, there's a lot of excitement around the house, a lot of buzzing and electricity and, well, not literal electricity, but, and the neighborhoods and everybody's coming over and they're trying to get interviews and stuff. So the family decides, hey, let's send the girls away to kind of keep them in check a little bit and help them relax after this strange experience that we're all going through. So, Kate was sent to the home of her older sister, Leah.
Okay.
who is now known as Leah Fox Fish because she had married. Unfortunately, Mr. Fish abandoned
Right.
the family.
Abandoned.
Yeah. So Leah was running, she had a child the same age as her sisters, actually, and was running the household by herself, giving music lessons.
So needless to say, her life was in a little bit of turmoil at that moment.
Yeah. Now, Margaret was sent to the home of her older brother, David, one of the older children that was already out of the house by the time they were born. And guess what?
What?
In both homes, the rappings followed them.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So then it became, well, it's not that the house is haunted. It's that these girls have a way to talk to spirits. There was a couple known as the Post, Amy and Isaac Post, and they were Quakers. Now, Quaker was a form of Christianity where they believed in communion with spirits and would speak in tongues, and began to quake. Hence, they were given the name the Quakers. Okay? So these were people who were down for communicating with spirits. This couple, Amy and Isaac Post, are friends of the Fox family, and they invite the girls to visit their Rochester home, since both of the girls are now living with siblings in Rochester.
Mm-hmm. Right.
They are convinced that the girls are telling the truth and that these are spirits communicating and they're hearing these rappings and everything. This helped them spread their spiritualism, basically.
Yeah.
Even though they weren't necessarily calling it that yet. Now, older sister Leah essentially became Maggie and Kate's manager.
Oh, yeah. She was hustling at that point.
Yeah. She knew a good thing when she saw it.
Absolutely, yeah.
So she said, I'm going to get these girls booked in theaters and...
Gonna make some money.
Yeah, and lecture halls and stuff like that, and we're going to send them around, and we're going to hobnob and make some money. All of a sudden, when their older sister Leah started talking about sending them out on tour and them giving lectures in big halls and everything,
Yeah.
the spirits announced that they were no longer going to speak.
Huh.
And that they were going to bid them all a fond farewell. They wrapped this out in their code.
All right. I can see what's happening here.
However, the silence of the spirits only lasted 12 days. And then they came back with a vengeance.
Yeah, I have a feeling that Leah may have had a word or two with the spirits. And say, you get your ass back here.
It is possible.
Yeah. There's money to be made.
So when when all three sisters hooked up, suddenly, that's when now the spirits could ring bells. They could move tables. They could do all kinds of things that they could never do before.
Yeah, they were way beyond just the rapping.
And sometimes the younger sister, Kate, wouldn't perform. She just refused to perform her spiritualism at all. But that's when, miraculously, older sister Leah
She'd come in and fix
her powers.
Yeah.
Now, in their seances, the sisters generally would try to find out who the audience wanted to talk to and then call on that spirit. And a lot of times, those would be the spirits of famous people.
Ah, yeah.
So at one seance, they wanted to speak to Benjamin Franklin. So they said, please try to make contact with the spirit of Benjamin Franklin. So, of course, this is when they were using the letters system where, they'd tap out the letter of the alphabet, the number of the letter of the alphabet they wanted to use, and they'd write it down, and, Stranger Things style. Right? Well, one of the sitters, they were getting answers from Benjamin Franklin, and one of the sitters made a comment that the spelling and the grammar was way off. And Benjamin Franklin, of course, is supposed to be one of the most brilliant
people
American
ever.
citizens to ever live.
A well-read man.
Maggie got up from the table
In a huff.
in a huff and said to her older sister, Leah, "You know, I never understood grammar." Funnily enough, the seances had a big rousing ending. Leah would step forward and hum the song Hail Columbia, while the spirits rhythmically rapped along. That's a big finish.
That is a big finish.
Singing with the spirits.
Yeah, geez. Those spirits are like dolphins.
Now, as they toured, they also started to find a number of copycats. Like when they came to a town, suddenly the next day, someone else in town could communicate with spirits. And then they became like a copycat imitator kind of thing. And again, this helped spread the spiritualist movement. So Kate and Margaret became well known as mediums, which are people who claim to be able to speak to the dead and deliver the news to the living. And they started giving seances for hundreds of people at a time. So these girls are touring all over and meeting all kinds of new people. But guess what?
What?
Their parents aren't around. The only one who's around
Leah.
is their older sister, Leah. And Leah, by the way, starts getting in on the game. Not just as the manager, but also now
as a medium.
She is a medium. Okay? But as they're running around to all these different theaters, and, you know, these are young girls, but they're meeting adults and hanging out in adult circles, they start to drink.
That's the devil's candy.
Uh-huh. And this will become a problem for the girls eventually. Now, even at the time, there were people who were skeptical of the girls' powers. And the leading theory on what was actually happening was that the girls were just basically cracking their joints.
Right.
And that's how they were producing these
those were
rappings.
those rappings. Yeah.
Right. A physician named E.P. Longworthy investigated the sisters, and he noticed that the knockings and rappings only occurred it sounded like it came from underneath their feet, or they only happened when the girls' dresses happened to be touching a table.
Yes.
So he said, you know, these two little girls are making these noises themselves. And lots of people came to the same conclusion. There was a reverend named Reverend Potts who demonstrated in front of an audience that he could make similar sounds using exactly that method.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've tried. I can crack joints and stuff.
Yeah, but nothing
it
loud
sounds
enough
like
for
I'm just-
like anyone to hear.
No, it wouldn't sound like, you know, although I can, sometimes my neck is pretty loud.
Oh, that was a good one. Oh,
Did the microphone pick that up? I don't know.
I hope so.
But even so, you'd see me turning my head and everything. So I don't think I can fool anybody that way. More people were studying the sisters, and they found that they could be producing the cracks by joints in their toes and knees, ankles, and hips. They discovered that the raps did not occur if the sisters were placed on a couch with cushions under their feet.
Huh.
Interesting. Now, the sisters didn't like to be examined very often, but it wasn't because they were afraid of being found out as frauds, so they said, but it was because of their feminine security. So they were like, no, it would be improper. Of course I need to wear my long dress.
Of course.
You know. Now, as early as 1851, Mrs. Norman Culver, who was a relative of the Fox family, signed a statement in which she claimed that she had assisted the sisters during their seances by touching them to indicate when the raps should be made. She also claimed that Kate and Margaret revealed to her their method of producing raps by snapping their toes or using their knees and their ankles. In 1857, the Boston Courier newspaper set a prize of $500 to anybody, not just the Fox sisters, but anybody who could provide proof of paranormal ability to their committee. So the Fox sisters actually attempted to win this prize, and they were investigated by 3 Harvard professors, who, by the way, are probably not the people you want investigating stuff.
Yeah, no, not
just
so
so
much.
you know. You want to hire a magician or somebody like that, someone with experience in hoaxing and fooling people. Anyway, On this occasion, they actually did fail the test, and the committee concluded that the raps were produced by their joints and movement of their feet. Today, in modern times, James Randi, who used to be a magician, and I guess technically still is a conjurer, as he would like to say.
His whole career, he wanted to disprove people.
Well, he only really started that in the later half of his career.
Oh, okay. But he was adamant about it. He
is very adamant about
it.
He
who's the one guy who basically ruined his career? The guy was...
You're probably thinking of Uri Geller?
Uri Geller?
Who bends the spoons?
Yeah, Who Bends the Spoons, him.
Yeah. Unfortunately, he didn't ruin his career.
Well, he tried really hard.
He did try.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you can't, the believers want to believe, and you can't stop it. Someday we'll do a whole episode maybe about James Randi, because he's got some really interesting stuff going on. But he does, to this day, has a $1 million prize for anybody who can prove any kind of paranormal stuff and, under controlled circumstances. And people, they always have some excuse why they can't do it for James Randi. And, Sylvia Brown, the psychic that used to be on Montel Williams all the time.
Yep.
She's dead now. She didn't see that coming.
Oh.
She famously accepted the challenge, or said she was going to, on Larry King Live. And then, of course, never did, and gave a whole list of excuses like, well, James Randi's not a godly man, and he'll put some kind of sinister whammy on me. And, they always have some excuse.
There's always some,
and even James Randi himself says, the pros will never come to me, because they know that, it's not worth
they'll be exposed.
Losing their career over. But the amateurs will come, or people who have really deceived themselves into believing they fooled themselves into thinking. But anyway, we digress. Over the years, like I said, on the tours and everything, Kate and Margaret had developed serious drinking problems. Around 1888, they started really brawling with their sister Leah and leading spiritualist.
Right.
Because basically they were just little girls when this all started, And now Sister Leah's like putting them on tour all the time and working them to the bone and saying, you got to go out and you got to do all this, and you got to talk to the spirits.
Yeah, and Leah actually, she stopped Margaret from getting an education.
Right.
Margaret, she had a scholarship offer. Someone was going to pay for full scholarship for her, and Leah said, Margaret, no, that's not happening. You need to stay in, she called it the family business.
Right. And it got so bad that like other spiritualists were concerned because Kate actually had children, and even other mediums were like, no, she's too like wild, like she's a mom.
Yeah, she needs to tone it down.
She needs to like get off the road and chill out.
Watch her kids.
Yeah, and go take care of her children. So as life goes on and they're giving these tours and everything, the younger sisters began to look for a way out, because it seems like they were never really interested in being part of the spiritualist movement, let alone considered the founders of it, and kind of...
Right, and then at that point, too, they were just puppets for Leah to, do whatever she pleases and whatever she thinks is best for them.
So they began to look for ways out, and of course, in those days, the way out was to get married. And that way you're beholden to your husband, not your older sister.
Right, exactly.
So both girls did get married. However, both girls' marriages ended in tragedy, because both of their husbands died very young and shortly after their marriages.
Yes.
And this, they already had a bit of a drinking problem after the loss of their husbands.
It got ramped up.
It got way worse.
Big time.
In fact, Kate was arrested in New York
for being a drunken fool.
For drunkenness and idleness. It was so bad that the welfare workers took custody of her sons.
Yeah.
Now, Maggie remained close to her sister Kate all this time.
Yeah.
Even though they weren't really talking to Leah anymore.
Yeah, they always had each other's back, though.
That's right.
Kate and Maggie.
So she was able to arrange it that the children would go live with an uncle over in England. But the girls, Maggie and Kate, no longer connected to their sister Leah.
Right. Do you imagine how bad you have to be that in the 1800s that your kids are taken away?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, people used to beat the crap out of their kids, and they were, just bad people. And they still got to keep their kids.
It had to be pretty rough, yeah.
So she must have been a mess.
Right. Now, older sister Leah, meanwhile, married a wealthy gentleman and kind of didn't need the spiritualist
She didn't
movement
need any.
anymore.
Yeah.
So she just kind of moved on with her life and really basically lost contact with her sisters.
Right.
So now the sisters are both trying to survive their alcoholism, both in financial woe after the death of their husband,
Right.
and kind of freaking out about it. Now, Maggie, during this time, she was considering converting to Catholicism.
Right.
And it's said that she was also suicidal, and one of the reasons she might not have killed herself was because she was considering this move to Catholicism. And of course, suicide is...
Against the rules.
Well, it's against the rules in any religion, I assume. But it is considered a deadly sin
It is.
in Catholicism. So if you kill yourself, that's like a ticket straight to damnation. But also in Catholicism, there's always the hope for redemption.
Right.
So she said, I know what I'll do. I'll go and tell the world the truth.
And do you think her telling the truth and kind of exposing her family is a swipe at Leah in any?
Well, I think it is, and not only that, but she was also paid to do it.
Well, I mean that doesn't hurt either. But I mean it probably kind of sweetened the pot for her that she's like, all right, I get to publicly I'll embarrass myself.
I think,
but I can take my older
her
sister down with me.
I think what happened is this: a reporter came to her and said, "Hey, for $1,500, if you will admit in front of an audience,
right,
that everything you did was a fraud, and show everybody how you did it, so they know that it was a fraud, we'll give you this money." So her thought process was probably, hey, I really could use that money right now.
right,
and so could my sister. And it'll be like a way to get back at Leah, like you said. And it'll be a way to kind of clear my conscience because,
right.
We've been lying this whole time, and it started this whole movement that's kind of swept the world, at least the Western world.
Right.
Now, she got on stage in New York City.
She got on stage at the New York Academy of Music.
That's right. There was about 2,000 people in the audience. And she began to demonstrate how she could produce at will a lot of the rapping noises and other various sounds that she had been using all this time. She also told the story of how the rappings started. This is a direct quote. When we went to bed at night, we used to tie an apple to a string and move the string up and down, causing the apple to bump onto the floor. Or we would drop the apple on the floor, making strange noises every time it would rebound. Mother listened to this for a time. She could not understand it and did not suspect us as being capable of a trick because we were just young girls. So then she talks about how another one of the older sisters, not Leah, but a different one, brought her to Rochester. And that was when they discovered new ways to make the rapping noises using their joints and all that stuff. She says, my sister Katie was the first to observe that by switching her fingers, she could produce certain noises with her knuckles and joints, and that the same effect could be made with the toes. Finding that we could make raps with our feet, first with one foot and then with both, we practiced until we could do this easily when the room was dark. So maybe that's it. We just haven't practiced enough. We got to find the technique and
there it is.
Practice it.
That's what it is.
That's practice. Back to the quote. Like most perplexing things when made clear, it is astonishing how easily it is done. The wrappings are simply the result of a perfect control of the muscles of the leg below the knee, which govern the tendons of the foot to allow actions of the toes and ankles that is not commonly known. Such perfect control is only possible when the child is taken at an early age and carefully and continually taught to practice with these muscles, which grow stiffer in later years. This, then, is the simple explanation of the whole method of knocks and raps. A great many people, when they hear the rappings, imagine at once that the spirits are touching them. This is a very common delusion. Some very wealthy people came to see me some years ago when I lived at 42nd Street, and I did some rappings for them. I made the spirit rap on a chair, and one of the ladies cried out, "I feel the spirit tapping my shoulder." Of course, that was pure imagination. So the audience, when they want to believe and they go there seeking something, this isn't the quote anymore, this is me talking. They will make up things using their own imagination in the heat of the moment.
Yeah.
That will aid the story.
Yeah, what they want to happen and they want to believe happens is happening.
Yeah, and that's no different today. That's exactly how it works these days,
too.
too.
Absolutely, yeah.
If you want to believe, you're more likely to feel that when you walk away, that something had happened, right? And maybe even additional things.
Yeah, you're going to pick what details you want to back up your perception of something.
It says that I have been chiefly instrumental in perpetrating the fraud of spiritualism upon a too confiding public. Most of you doubtless know. The greatest sorrow in my life has been that this is true, and though it has come late in my day, I am now prepared to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God. I am here tonight as one of the founders of spiritualism to denounce it as an absolute falsehood from beginning to end, as the flimsiest of superstitions, the most wicked blasphemy known to the world. So that was Margaret Fox. Now, only Maggie appeared on stage, but Kate was in the audience. So that was looked on as her, approving. But Kate had always been the shyer of the two.
Right. And Kate didn't say anything at this appearance. She was just there. She was just a presence.
Right. But they both did sign statements against spiritualism. I regard spiritualism as one of the greatest curses that the world has ever known. That's Katie Fox, speaking in October of 1888. Now, the girls had given up their spiritualism and their rappings and all that, but now they found they were still alcoholics.
Yeah, they didn't give up the bottle.
And they still had money troubles.
Yes.
So after that $1,500 ran out from the newspaper reporter, they turned back to spiritualism. Even though they admitted they were frauds, even though they'd gone on stage and performed everything.
But the spirits told them.
Suddenly they said, no, we only said that because we were pressured to and we needed the money. The truth is, these really are spirits talking.
Yeah.
It's not just a matter of joints and muscles and all that. It really is true. And they tried to continue that until their deaths, which wasn't very long after this.
Right.
They both died alcoholics.
In poverty.
And were buried in paupers' graves.
Yep.
Somewhere in New York. Their sister Leah, on the other hand,
married rich,
and died well off. She made off like a bandit, as far as this stuff goes. And the spiritualist movement took off all over the world, the Western world, anyway. Mm-hmm. And there's other spiritualist mediums who would go on to become much more famous and certainly much wealthier than the Fox sisters.
Oh, sure.
But it all started with these little girls playing a prank on their mom.
With apples.
Yeah. And suddenly it turned into this big giant thing that they had absolutely no control over and a deceit that they had to keep up for most of their lives.
That's no way to live. I mean, I can understand all the pressure that they felt day in and day out, and I can honestly see how they became alcoholics.
Yeah, well, I mean, just imagine you're a 12 or a 14-year-old girl.
Yeah.
You play this prank, and it's, it starts off pretty funny.
Yeah.
Like, oh, mom thinks that these are spirits, so let's keep fooling her. Then she calls the neighbors, and now you're really getting some attention. So again,
right.
That's pretty funny.
It's in the newspapers, it's in, yep.
And the girl said, by the way, too, that Leah came to them after, Leah had read the pamphlet, and then Maggie went to live with Leah and everything. And Leah said, all right, how you doing it? Like, she knew right away.
Yeah, she was smart, yeah.
And she was like, I know that you're doing it, but we can make money off of this.
Right.
So let's do that. So the girls might have been a little bit enticed. Again, they're getting attention and they're getting a little bit of fame off this, even just on a local level.
It ended up just being way bigger than they could handle.
It got out of hand for them.
Yeah.
But by that point, they felt like they couldn't. And also, older sister Leah was there probably threatening to beat the shit out of them or whatever. Yeah. So, because don't forget, older sister Leah is much older. She's old enough to be their parents.
Yes.
As a matter of fact. So that's probably a very intimidating figure in their life, especially when you consider that Leah was a single woman with her own children in the early mid 1800s. That is not an easy life.
No, not at all.
And you have to be a certain type of individual to pull that off. So I'm sure she was a very forceful and willful person.
Yep.
And that a 12 or a 13-year-old girl would be intimidated by this figure. And that's what happened. So I think basically they were bullied. Because even in the beginning, they tried to stop it pretty much right away.
Yeah.
Once before it left Rochester.
Yeah, they tried nipping it in the butt, and it just, Leah picked up on it, knew she could make some money. She made a nice career, and it's at the expense of her sisters.
There's honest ways to make a buck, and then there's dishonest ways to make a buck. But, I think the story could have a happier ending if Leah had just been, A, a little bit kinder to her sisters.
Yep.
And B, spread the wealth.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Just help your sisters out a little bit.
Yeah, they're the ones with the so-called gift.
Yeah.
I mean, she's like she's like a Culkin.
Yeah.
She's like the Culkin parents, Leah.
Yeah.
The kids are doing everything, and she's collecting it.
Yeah. Now, me, even though I'm a hardcore skeptic,
yes,
and I'm a real, prove it to me kind of guy, and so far there's no proof, and generally I like to hate on people who claim these kind of abilities.
Yeah, naturally.
And especially these people who have admitted that they're a fraud and then go back to it.
Right.
But I think this is the rare case where it's actually more of a tragedy. And again, especially considering the young age of the girls at the time it all started, that their whole life was built on this deceit, essentially, because they became famous for this, and they were traveling, and this was the only job that they'd known, and all that kind of stuff. So I think they deserve a little bit more sympathy than some of the folks, certainly modern folks, who definitely
I agree too.
Should know better.
Yep. Completely agree.
So, if you want to see commercials for Mysteries of the Unknown, a Time Life series of books, you go to spookyasshit.com. There will also be pictures of the Fox sisters. Katie's kind of pretty.
Yeah, they put her in the middle in that one picture, and she's a little foxy.
For those
I'll give
days.
it to her. Leah not so much, and Maggie woof.
Yeah, not lookers. They weren't getting by on their looks.
No. It's a good thing that they developed a skill.
Yeah. Bro talk. Even when we're talking about...
Yeah, it's always around the corner, bro talk.
Yeah. You can also see, I will post pictures of the other spiritualists, of the other mediums, the 1980s mediums that we talked about, because
they're pretty great, folks. You have to see it.
Yeah. It's something special.
It's worth going to the website just to see.
They're in their trance, and they're communicating as their spirits that have entered their body, and just the poses they pick out and everything else, and
it's
and
very
the hairstyles
80s,
and
very 80s.
The sweaters, all of it. But I have to say, $10 for this book. I think even though that is more than you probably need to pay, it's a good book. So I don't feel that I got ripped off.
There you go. Good.
It's a good book. I would like to get the whole set eventually, but even I'm like, I don't know, man. I'll spend $60 on it right now. Maybe some nice listener will get me one for Festivus. But anyway, anything else to say or report?
No, people just review on iTunes, email with any questions, comments, and concerns.
spookyashit@gmail.com.
Yeah, and just tell Eric how much you like listening.
And come visit Salem this October. And if you're lucky, you just might run into the Witchfinder General, who I happen to know pretty damn well. Until next time, Don't be afraid.
Spooky Times is a Witchfinder production.